You're a German soldier in France. You look up at the sky, and it's gone. Replaced by thousands of American aircraft, so thick they block out the sun. The sound alone shakes the earth beneath your boots. That wasn't a nightmare. That was just Tuesday. 300. 00 aircraft. These are 50 of them. Part 1. Fighters. P-51 Mustang. The Mustang solved a crisis. Allied bombers were dying in droves over Germany with no fighter escort capable of going the distance. The P-50 changed that. Fast, agile, and with drop tanks it could fly to Berlin and back. When Mustangs appeared over Germany, Hermann Göring reportedly said he knew the war was lost. It didn't just fight well. It turned the tide. 2. P-47 Thunderbolt pilots called it the Jug, short for Juggernaut, and it earned the name. The heaviest single-engine fighter of the war, the P-47 could absorb punishment that would destroy anything else and keep flying. 8.50 caliber guns, bombs, rockets. It became the most feared ground attack aircraft in Western Europe. Rail yards, tank columns, supply convoys. If it moved on the ground, Thunderbolts were hunting it. 3. P-38 Lightning twin booms, twin engines, and firepower concentrated in the nose. The Lightning was unlike anything else flying. In the Pacific, it was the weapon of choice for America's top ace, Richard Bong, who finished with 40 kills. It was also the aircraft that intercepted and shot down Admiral Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, in one of the war's most audacious targeted missions. 4. P-40 Warhawk, not the fastest, not the most agile, but it was there when America needed it. Made famous by the Flying Tigers in China, the P-40's shark-mouth nose art became one of the war's most iconic images. Pilots learned to exploit its strengths, ruggedness, dive speed, heavy firepower, and against the odds, they made it work. 5. P-39 Airacobra Strange by design. The engine sat behind the pilot, driving the propeller via a long shaft, allowing a 37mm cannon to fire through the nose hub. American pilots found it lacking at altitude. The Soviets disagreed completely. Thousands went to the USAAF via Lend-Lease, where aces like Alexander Pokrishkin, 59 kills, flew it at low altitude with deadly result. 6. P-61 Black Widow War doesn't stop at sundown. The P-61 was America's answer, the first purpose-built night fighter, equipped with airborne radar to hunt in total darkness. Painted black, crewed by 3, armed with 4 20mm cannons and 4.50 caliber guns. While other aircraft went home at dusk, the Black Widow was just getting started. 7. F-4F Wildcat. In the desperate early months of the Pacific War, the Wildcat was all the Navy had. Against the nimble Zero, it was outmatched. But American pilots invented the Thatch Weave, a 2-aircraft defensive tactic that leveled the odds. Wildcats held the line at Coral, Sea, Midway, and Guadalcanal. History doesn't always belong to the best machine. Sometimes it belongs to the pilots willing to fight with what they have. 8. F-6F Hellcat Grumman engineers studied the Zero and built its nemesis. Bigger, tougher, and easier to fly than what it replaced, the Hellcat climbed faster and hit harder, and could absorb damage that would destroy a Zero. The results were extraordinary. Over 5, 0 enemy aircraft destroyed at a 19-to-1 kill ratio. In the history of aerial combat, that number stands almost alone. 9. F-4U Corsair. Those bent, inverted gull wings weren't style. They were engineering. The massive propeller needed ground clearance, and conventional wings would have required absurdly long landing gear. The solution gave the Corsair one of the war's most distinctive silhouettes. Japanese pilots feared it enough to give it a name, Whistling Death. You could hear it coming before you ever saw it. 10. F-8F Bearcat, the peak of piston engine fighter design, arriving just too late for combat. Light, powerful, with a climb rate that embarrassed everything around it, opened it. The Bearcat could reach 10,000 feet faster than almost any aircraft then flying. Had the war continued into a Japanese land invasion, it would have led the charge. Instead, it became a post-war air racer and still holds records today. Part 2. Bombers. B-17 Flying Fortress, the name was earned. Crews flew home on one engine, with tail sections missing, cockpits open to the sky. The B-17's ability to absorb punishment and keep flying became almost legendary. And it needed to be, because unescorted deep into Germany, the losses were brutal. The Flying Fortress became a symbol of something harder to define than firepower: the refusal to go down. 12. B-24 Liberator, less glamorous than the B-17, built in greater numbers than any other American aircraft of the war, over 18,000 total. Its long Davis wing gave exceptional range, making it indispensable across the vast Pacific. It carried bigger bomb loads farther than the B-17. The daring low-level raid on Romania's Ploiești oil refineries, one of the war's costliest missions, was flown entirely by B-24s. 13. B-29 Superfortress, science fiction made real. Pressurized cabins, remote-controlled gun turrets, nearly 3,500 miles of range. The B-29 operated in a different technological universe from anything before it. Built specifically to reach Japan from Pacific bases, it firebombed Japanese cities with devastating effect. On August 6 and 9, 1945, two B-29s, Enola Gay and Boxcar, changed the world forever. 14. B-25 Mitchell. On April 18, 1942, 16 B-25s did the impossible, launched from an aircraft carrier to bomb Tokyo. The Doolittle raid caused minimal physical damage, but shattered Japan's belief it was untouchable. For the rest of the war, the Mitchell served across every theater, perfecting skip bombing, flying low over water, and bouncing bombs directly into enemy ship hulls. 15. B-26 Marauder. Early on, pilots called it the Widowmaker. Its short wings and high speed demanded skills many trainees didn't yet have, and the accidents showed it. But engineers fixed the problems, training improved, and the Marauder transformed completely. By war's end, it had the lowest loss rate of any American bomber in Europe. Not the fastest, not the biggest, but the most likely to bring you home. 16. A-20 Havoc. Fast, low, and lethal. Built for missions where speed mattered more than bomb load, the Havoc screamed in under enemy radar, hit hard, and was gone before defenses could fully react. Thousands went to the Soviet Union via Lend-Lease, where they proved devastatingly effective on the Eastern Front. Sometimes the best armor is speed. 17. A-26 Invader. Late to the war but immediately impressive, fast enough to outrun piston-engine interceptors, armed enough to fight its way out. The Invader hit European targets in the war's final months and proved so capable, the military kept flying it through Korea and Vietnam. A 1944 design still relevant in the 1960s. That's a legacy. 18. B-32 Dominator. Built as a backup in case the B-29 program failed. The Dominator arrived too late to matter much, but it earned one historical footnote. On August 18, 1945, 3 days after Japan's surrender announcement, B-32s on a reconnaissance mission were attacked by Japanese fighters. They were the last American aircraft fired upon in World War II. Part 3. Dive Bombers and Attack Aircraft. SBD Dauntless Midway, June 4, 1942. In 5 minutes, Dauntless crews sank 3 Japanese fleet carriers. A 4th fell that afternoon. Japan lost 4 of its 6 frontline carriers in a single day, and the Pacific War turned. The Dauntless was slow and unglamorous, but diving near vertically through anti-aircraft fire to sink the ships that made Pearl Harbor possible. It may have done more to win the Pacific War than any other aircraft. 20. SB-2C Helldiver pilots called it the Beast, and early on they meant it as an insult. Handling problems, structural failures, a miserable cockpit. The Dauntless it was supposed to replace stayed in service far longer than planned. But the engineers persisted. The problems were fixed, and by 1944 the Helldiver was hitting Japanese carriers and airfields across the Pacific. Sometimes persistence is everything. 21. A-36 Apache. Take a P-51 Mustang, add dive brakes for precision bombing runs, and you get the Apache, the Mustang's ground attack cousin. It served in North Africa and Italy, hitting armor, bridges, and supply depots with accuracy that level bombers couldn't match. A reminder that the Mustang's genius extended well beyond the dogfight. 22. TBF Avenger, a big, powerful torpedo bomber built around one purpose, hitting ships. 3 crew, torpedo or bombs internally, defensive guns to fight its way out. It flew its first mission at Midway and took heavy losses, but survived to be refined into one of the Pacific's most effective naval strike aircraft. One notable pilot, a young Navy lieutenant named George H.W. Bush, shot down in 1944 and rescued by submarine. 23. TBD Devastator advanced in 1937, the Navy's first all-metal monoplane, obsolete by 1942. At Midway, Torpedo Squadron 8 flew 15 Devastators against the Japanese fleet. All 15 were shot down. 1 pilot survived. Their sacrifice drew Japanese fighters down low, arguably setting up the dauntless attack that followed. The Devastator never flew in combat again after Midway. Part 4. Patrol and Maritime Aircraft. 24. PBY Catalina. Slow, ungainly, and possibly the most beloved American aircraft of the entire war. The Catalina found the Japanese fleet before Midway, rescued downed pilots from shark-infested waters under fire, and hunted U-boats across the Atlantic on missions lasting 20 hours. Crews called it Dumbo. Over 1,000 American aircrew owed their lives to it, quiet, patient, saving lives while faster aircraft got the glory. 25. PBM Mariner. The Catalina's bigger, faster sibling. Heavier weapons, greater range, more aggressive submarine tracking. The Mariner patrolled the Atlantic as its primary hunting ground, contributing meaningfully to breaking the U-boat threat that nearly strangled Britain's supply lines in the early war years. 26. PB-4Y Privateer. A B-24 Liberator rebuilt from the ground up for maritime patrol. Single tail. Low-altitude optimization, submarine hunting sensors. It combined the Liberator's long range with weapons and equipment, tuned specifically for finding and killing U-boats. By the time it entered service, it represented how dramatically American anti-submarine warfare had evolved since 1942. 27. PV-1 Ventura. Faster than a flying boat, land-based, with enough offensive power to attack what it found. The Ventura filled the middle ground in maritime patrol, chasing submarines and striking coastal targets across both the Atlantic and the Pacific, doing useful work without ever becoming famous for it. 28. PV-2 Harpoon. Everything the Ventura wanted to be. More fuel, heavier weapons, better range. The Harpoon applied every lesson from its predecessor and arrived in 1944 to serve through the war's final campaigns. A quiet professional doing essential, unglamorous work. Part 5. Transport Aircraft and Gliders. 29. C-47 Skytrain. Eisenhower listed it alongside the bazooka, the jeep, and the atomic bomb as weapons that won the war. The C-47 carried paratroopers into Normandy, dropped supplies to Bastogne, and flew the Himalayas in conditions that defied belief. No guns, no armor, no mystique. But remove it from the war and the Allied supply chain collapses. It was the circulatory system of the entire air effort. 30. C-46 Commando. Bigger and higher flying than the C-47, the Commando was built for the hump. The brutal route over the Himalayas from India to China. Ice on every surface, weather that turned deadly without warning. Mountains below offering no safe landing. C-46 crews flew it continuously, maintaining the supply lifeline that kept China in the fight. 31. C-54 Skymaster. The executive transport of the war, long range, 4 engines. Ocean crossing capability. Roosevelt flew to Yalta in one nicknamed Secret Cow, equipped with a special lift for his wheelchair. MacArthur flew from the Philippines in one. The Skymaster connected global Allied leadership across thousands of miles, in ways that simply hadn't been possible before. 32. C-82 Packet. A new philosophy in cargo design. Build around what you need to carry. The Packet's twin-boom layout and rear-loading doors let trucks and artillery pieces drive straight in and out, revolutionary at the time. It arrived too late for extensive WWII service, but became the template for military cargo aircraft for decades to come. 33. Waco CG-4A Glider. No engine, no armor, wood and fabric. The Waco carried 13 armed soldiers into combat at the end of a tow rope, landing in darkness among obstacles the enemy placed specifically to destroy them. Glider pilots then fought as infantry. No extraction, no second chance. At D-Day, Market Garden, and the Rhine Crossing, these silent aircraft delivered what paratroopers alone could not. Part 6. Trainer Aircraft. 34. PT-17 Cadet. The first aircraft almost every American military pilot ever flew. A biplane with an open cockpit and a reassuringly rumbling radial engine. Gentle enough for novices, demanding enough to build real skills. Over 10. Z-0 were built. Some are still flying today, still teaching what stick and rudder flying actually feels like. 35. T-6 Texan, where student pilots stopped surviving and started actually flying. More powerful, more demanding, closer to real combat aircraft. The Texan was used by virtually every Allied Air Force. Its distinctive engine growl was so recognizable that Hollywood used it as a stand-in for Japanese Zeros in countless war films. Many are still flying today. 36. BT-13 Valiant. The middle step, more powerful than the Cadet, less demanding than the Texan. The Valiant introduced retractable landing gear and proper cockpit procedures. Pilots called it the Vulti-Vibrator. Not an insult, really, but a tribute to the very direct, honest feedback it gave through every control surface. If you could fly the Valiant well, you were ready for what came next. 37. PT-19. A deliberate shift in training philosophy. Low-wing monoplane instead of biplane, matching the actual fighters and bombers students would fly in combat. Simple, reliable, and built in large numbers. The PT-19 trained thousands of Allied pilots and made the transition to combat aircraft significantly less dangerous. 38. AT-11 Wichita. Strategic bombing required more than pilots. It needed bombardiers and navigators trained to precision. The AT-11 provided that training, with a bombardier station in the nose and room for instructors alongside students. It turned raw recruits into the precision technicians that the heavy bombing campaign over Europe absolutely depended on. Part 7. Float planes and seaplanes. 39. OS-2U Kingfisher. Launched by catapult from battleships and cruisers. Recovered by crane from the sea. The Kingfisher was the Navy's eyes for naval gunfire. It also rescued pilots. At Leyte Gulf, a Kingfisher pilot landed under fire to pick up a downed airman. Then, too heavy to take off, taxied across open ocean until a submarine arrived to collect them both. 40. Sock Seagull. Already largely obsolete when the war began, the Seagull kept flying because the ships needed it and the replacement wasn't ready. Launched by catapult, recovered from the sea. It spotted naval gunfire and performed reconnaissance from warships throughout the early war years. A reminder that good enough and available often beats perfect but not yet here. 41. SC Seahawk. Designed to fix everything wrong with older observation float planes. Faster, aerodynamically cleaner, more capable. The Seahawk entered service in late 1944 and showed where naval aviation was heading, even if it arrived too late to accumulate the service record of its predecessors. 42. J2F Duck. An amphibian that could operate from land or water, the Duck became the go-to rescue aircraft when a pilot went down somewhere a flying boat couldn't reach. At Guadalcanal, a Duck pilot landed under fire, rescued a Marine aviator, taxied out of range of the shooting, and took off with the man crammed into the aircraft. Improvised heroism was its entire character. 43. SO3C Seamew. Designed to replace the Seagull, the Seamew never fully lived up to expectations. Performance issues dogged it throughout its service life, but it illustrates an uncomfortable truth about wartime procurement. Sometimes you order what you can get, make it work as best you can, and keep flying regardless. Part 8. Jets and Experimental Aircraft. 44. P-59 Aerocomet. While P-40s were fighting over North Africa, Bell Aircraft was flying something from another era entirely, America's first jet. The Aerocomet wasn't a great fighter. Its performance barely bettered the best piston-engine aircraft. But that wasn't the point. The point was learning. How does jet propulsion behave? What does it demand from a pilot? Every American jet that followed owes something to what was discovered here. 45. XP-80 Shooting Star. If the Aerocomet was the rough draft, the Shooting Star was the finished sentence. Faster, sleeker, genuinely superior to piston-engine aircraft, it proved American jet aviation had truly arrived. Too late for FET combat, it became the F-80 that flew in Korea. The lineage from the XP-80 runs directly to every American jet fighter that followed. 46. XP-67 Moonbat. Sometimes the experiments that fail matter as much as the ones that succeed. The Moonbat attempted to blend fuselage, engines, and wings into one smooth aerodynamic shape, beautiful in theory, troubled in practice. Only one was built, the project was cancelled, but the aerodynamic questions it raised influenced designers for years afterward. 47. YB-35 Flying Wing. Jack Northrop believed the perfect aircraft would be nothing but wing. No fuselage, no unnecessary drag. The YB-35 was his attempt to prove it. It flew. It was unlike anything in the sky, and Northrop was right about the future. The B-2 Spirit, stealth bomber, is a direct descendant of his vision. He saw a model of it just before his death in 1981, and was reportedly moved to tears. 48. XP-81. What if you combined a jet engine for speed with a turboprop for range? The XP-81 was built to find out. Complex to develop, and the war ended before it could prove itself. But the thinking, hybrid propulsion, optimizing for different flight regimes, was genuinely ahead of its time, and the idea reappears in aerospace engineering to this day. Part 9. Helicopters. 49. R-4 Hoverfly. Ugly, slow, barely capable of carrying one passenger. Also the first mass-produced military helicopter in the world. And in 1944, it performed the first helicopter rescue in history, extracting casualties from Burma, where no fixed-wing aircraft could land. Every medevac flight in Korea and Vietnam, every helicopter assault, every search and rescue mission. It all starts here, with this ungainly little machine that flew at 80 miles per hour when the wind cooperated. 50. R5. The R4's successor, more powerful, more reliable, with a cabin that could actually be useful. It arrived too late to matter in WWII, but it established the pattern. Rescue, medevac, reconnaissance. Together, the R4 and R5 represent the birth of an entirely new dimension in warfare, one that would reshape every conflict that followed. 50 aircraft, millions of people who built them, flew them, and sometimes died in them. Workers who had never held a rivet gun became the backbone of a war industry. 20-year-old pilots climbed into cockpits, not knowing whether they would come back. Mustang, Hellcat, Flying Fortress, Catalina. These are not just machines. These are the evidence of an era when people looked at the world, saw something unacceptable, and decided to do something about it. The war ended long ago. The aircraft rest quietly in museums now. But if one day you stand before a B-17 and smell the oil and the aluminum, and see the rows of rivets and the worn paint, remember what it was built for and what it did.